So we didn't get the result we wanted on Saturday in the Derby with Sandman running seventh. We'll touch real quickly on Sandman and his experience because I'm sure, if you're watching the show and you're not that interested, you're a little Sandmaned out. But he is pointing to the Belmont, and there's going to be more to come on that front. It was a phenomenal experience. Like I said, I hadn't been to the Derby in almost 20 years. It was really impressive, all the renovations they did at Churchill for last year, and also the free food and drink thing. Like, way to go! Like, I know they jacked up the ticket prices, but that just made everything so much smoother and so much easier and move quicker. So just a quick aside, I think that's a really could be a template for other sporting venues and big races. We were way too far back. I don't want to use that as an excuse because Sovereignty was pretty far back too. And I thought right midway around the far turn, we were right next to Sovereignty, and I was like, okay, these two are going to come and reel in everybody. But Sovereignty had more of a kick in the stretch. Jose said Sandman didn't really get a hold of the sloppy track, but he still tried hard. And I think when Jose realized he couldn't get top four or top five, he kind of just let him gallop in. Journalism ran great. He was just second best in the race that day. Baeza ran really well, and it proved that he belonged in the race, and that maybe the point system should be adjusted next year in case that happens again. It was, the rain was a little bit of a bummer, but it wasn't like a total washout like they were predicting. Like it was off and on for most of the day. Good cheer was phenomenal in the Oaks. We're going to talk about all the undercard races, but I want to toss it to John and just tell us a little bit about your experience with your dad and your family on Saturday.
Yeah, overall it was a great experience. Except for those 2 minutes from 7:02 to 7:04 on Saturday, and even that wasn't that bad because we're still, arguably one of the top 10 3-year-olds in the crop, which is pretty amazing and outstanding. Joe, takeaways from me on the day and the weekend. Number one, applause, standing ovation to Churchill Downs for everything that they did. The renovations, Churchill Downs now is a behemoth. I mean, it takes a good 15, 20 minutes to walk from one side of the facility to the other. But the paddock was beautiful. It was literally standing room only for Oaks Day and for Derby Day in the paddock. I thought from a security standpoint, they handled everything really well. They were very diligent about making sure that you had the proper credentials to get in where you were supposed to. So that was, it was a minor annoyance. It's kind of like when you go to the airport and people complain about being in security lines. It's like, it's for your safety. So just suck it up and deal with it. I thought the food was very good. I thought the presentation of the food was phenomenal. I wish I took more pictures. I only took, color you shocked. I only took pictures of the dessert bar, the dessert table.
Don't forget about your Michelin Man picture.
And we'll get to my Michelin Man, my stunt double picture. I'm sure Patty will throw that up as we're talking about it. But speaking of the Michelin Man, and there were a lot of famous people, even more famous than the two of us, if you can believe it. No other important podcasters were there, but you and I were there, obviously. Other good takeaways: the track superintendent between the turf course, which looked like you could play the Masters off of it. I mean, it was just pristine and beautiful. And despite the rain they had all week, off and on, it wasn't coming up in clumps. It wasn't inconsistent. It was beautifully maintained, and the racetrack was what you'd expect when you had 14 straight hours of rain on it. It was, they tried to seal it. It didn't really hold necessarily. It got a little sloppy and slick and sticky. At some point in time, I was going to bring my shoes down, but I thought it'd be too goofy. But at some point in time, I lost a shoe because it got sucked into the mud, so deeply. And people were kind of trying to navigate what the best part of the racetrack was as far as, firmness and sloppiness. But overall, I think that, from a safety standpoint, you have to be, pleased with the fact that Heisa and the vets took it very seriously. I know that Grande got scratched, and Todd Pletcher publicly said the horse had a foot bruise. And if they had given it, another couple of days, if the race was Monday instead of Saturday, the horse would have been fine. But, he called a spade and said, yeah, you know what? If you, I think the horse is sound, I would run him, but I understand the argument as to why to have him pulled from the race. So overall, I think from a presentation standpoint, from a facility standpoint, from a food standpoint, and obviously from a racing standpoint, it checked all the boxes. Now we can talk a little bit about the NBC analysis and what they talked about, and I'm not necessarily in agreement with some of the stories that they focused on, but I think they were also kind of scrambling a little bit because Mike Tirico unfortunately had a nut allergy, like either the night before or the day of, and had to be scratched himself, and they had to bring in other. So I know just from our interview last week, like that's a big, a big kerfuffle. That's a big, issue that they had to deal with. Not a kerfuffle, but that's a big issue that they had to deal with. Is all of a sudden your lead anchor is on the DL, literally in the 11th hour before you go live.
Yeah, well, that's tough. I obviously didn't see any of the coverage because we were there. But just in terms of the race, I kick it warm-hearted about Godolphin winning. Like, I get that they've been trying to do this forever, and I know they have a lot of good people working for them, but at the end of the day, like, it's the richest people in the world. Like, who gives a shit if they finally got the shiny trophy that they wanted this whole time? I am very happy for Bill Mott and Junior Alvarado. We're going to talk a little bit about Junior later in the epic performance of the week. I was happy for Bill Mott because, he has won the Derby before, but it was with Country House.
It was a DQ.
Getting elevated via DQ. And just, whatever you say, like, that's not the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? As crossing the wire first, like, you still celebrate, but I think it takes a lot out of the accomplishment. And this was undeniable that the best horse won the race, and he's the best 3-year-old in the country right now. We'll see whether he goes on to the Triple Crown. Like, that's yet another year where that's a discussion, whether or not the Derby winner is going to go to the Triple Crown or go to the Preakness and try to go for the Triple Crown. And that's the new normal in racing. But Bill Mott is the kind of guy that he doesn't jam his horses into the Derby or any of these Triple Crown races. He lets the horses take him there, and I think that is really admirable. And it's obviously there's a certain sort of luxury to that approach because he's won so much and he's a Hall of Famer that, he doesn't really need the Derby to, validate his resume. But I think that the horsemanship of having that approach is really significant, and I think is a great model for a lot of people. By the way, apropos of nothing, Bill Mott looks great for 71.
Yeah,
I see him in the paddock, and I read the article. He's 71. I thought it said, I would have said he's like in his mid 50s if I didn't know any better. So shout out to Bill Mott and his team. Like, there's a reason they're as successful as they are, and it's because they take care of the horses, and they like a lot like Shug. We use Shug a good amount. Like, they're building them for a career,
right? Not
just for a 2-year-old championship or a 3-year-old championship. And I'm really, really happy for Junior Alvarado because he's a terrific rider. And he's been so unlucky with injuries. And he got hurt in mid-March. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, not again. Like, the guy's got a live Derby mount, and he falls off a horse, and he breaks his scapula. And he came back in 3 weeks, and he was able to ride and ride in the Derby. And he gave the horse a perfect ride. He was able to save ground on the first turn. He tipped out, didn't get him stuck in traffic. John, I'm curious. Like, I didn't see that many trips. I know Burnham Square had a little bit of trouble on the far turn, and I think ran a little bit better than it looked. I didn't see, like, considering the 19 horses and the sloppy track, I didn't see like a bunch of like screaming like, oh my God, this horse had such a nightmare trip. But to me, I thought it was a just result. I think the best 3 horses in the race ran 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think arguably you can say that. I think that there were a couple of horses, ours included, that I think really didn't like the surface. And I know people say, well, they all run on the same racetrack. That's true, but certain horses have certain preferences. I mean, it's kind of like certain people have certain food preferences. Just because a Mexican restaurant is great doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to like it the best. That's kind of a silly argument, but. Be that as it may, I think that arguably when you look back and you look at the racing form, you and I even talked about it, like all the 21 horses that were in the race, how many of them had never won a stake race before? How many of them never won on the dirt before? And when you kind of winnow down the group, it came down to like 3 or 4 horses, of which, the first 3 horses were in that group. And then, Sandman was kind of the 4th one of the group as well. So I think from a handicapping standpoint, it was pretty spot on and pretty true to form. Going back to Bill Mott, I know I've told this story before, so I'll kind of truncate it this time. But we were, I was handing him the trophy at the Breeders' Cup when just FYI won the juvenile filly, and I remember there was a lot of pomp and circumstance, and he kind of leaned into me, and I hadn't really spoken to him very much over the years. And he leaned over to me and he said, John, do you know how long this is going to take? And I said, well, they're in commercial break right now, so I'm assuming it's going to be like another 2 or 3 minutes. And he said, okay, can you please send my regards? I have to go saddle another horse. And he left. And I mean, how many trainers do you know that would have given up like the 30 or 60 seconds of NBC, time slot to say whatever he was going to say and promote himself? But instead he was like, nope, I have another horse in another race. And granted, there was another Breeders' Cup race, but I have another horse, another group of people that I represent. I need to be there. And he's got the best assistants in the world who can handle saddling a horse. And he could have been a couple of minutes late and walked in and wouldn't have missed a beat. The horse would have been saddled. They hadn't given the instructions yet. He hadn't, there was time to speak to all the owners and all the dignitaries that were representing the horse. But in his mind, he was like, no, I need to be there. This horse is under my care. And, my name is on the program and represents me. I need to make sure there's no problems, and gave up the trophy presentation on national television for it. And if that doesn't say the measure of a man, as far as where his ego is and being in check and understanding what his duties are and everything, I don't know what else does. How many other trainers do you know? And we work with a lot of egomaniacs in this business, Joe, on the trainer side, the partner side, and everywhere in between. How many people would have done that? I wouldn't have. I would have been like, you know what? I got Joe to handle the rest of the show. I'm going to be here sipping champagne.
Yeah, it really is a great point, because I sure as shit would have been holding up that trophy and taking a picture.
You and I were fighting over the trophy in the Arkansas Derby.
Yeah,
it was.
That thing almost broke in half with all the tug of war going with the Arkansas Derby trophy. No, I think that's phenomenal. And I think, like I said, he's a great example for the industry, yes, and for other horse people, with the way he conducts himself and the way he trains his horses. So I think that's huge.
And Joe, somebody asked me this question who doesn't know the industry, but asked me the very innocent question of, well, the results aren't going to be the results from the 2 weeks until you get the test back. You know what? With Bill Mott, you don't worry about that. You don't worry about it. The horse hit the wire first, and the horse and the money is pretty much in the bank. Like that, you never have to worry about anything like that with this situation. And that was one of the things that like NBC went off the rails, I think, promoting just how much, it was great to have Bob Baffert back, and it's so wonderful, and and they put so much money into it, and all those things are true as far as his owners put a lot of money in. He is a draw, and he had a couple of horses that were entered in the Kentucky Derby. But for the love of God, man, there's 18 other stories to talk about in the industry, and I think they went way to the other side of the spectrum as far as lauding the situation of the fact that he was allowed to come back to enter horses at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. He's one story, but he's not the only story. In another story, and this is kind of an ancillary story that was surrounding Sandman that I think got a lot of press, both positive and negative, mm-hmm. Was Griffin Johnson, mm-hmm. and his attachment via ABR and via West Point. Full disclosure, with Sandman, he was given a small stake of a horse in their stake and start of the horse in their stake and stardom program, and this is one of those things where I can kind of see both sides. Like, if you think that it should mostly be about the animal, and if you think that he was kind of making it too much about himself at certain points, mm-hmm. then I can respect that. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, how desperate are we to get 20-somethings and 30-somethings into this game? Beggars cannot be choosers. Like, if he didn't do every single thing that you wanted the way that you wanted him to do it along the way, I think you kind of got to suck it up and appreciate the potentially millions of eyes that he's bringing to the sport. Like, I try to stay off Twitter after these kind of races, but I saw a lot of ugliness, shocking, on racing Twitter afterward, kind of like gloating that Sandman lost, mm-hmm. and like, oh, how could he be 5-1? Right. Oh, it's because Sheik Mo isn't a social media influencer, and it's like, really, like, you're mad that a lot of people came into the game, a lot of casual money came into the pools and made Sandman maybe a bit of an underlay, and there were too many young eyes on the sport. Like, this is one of the things that drives me crazy, because we rack our brains mm-hmm. for years and years and years and years about how do we get young people interested in the sport. And here's a guy who is completely obsessed with this horse, and is giving the young people an inside look into a business that they would never in a million years stumble upon organically. And you still have people whining about it. Like, that is what drives me nuts, is like, you can't do both. You can't complain that we don't have enough young people watching the sport and then also gatekeep the sport for those young people and say, wait, you're not doing it the right way. That really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And like I said, if you think that Griffin didn't handle it, perfectly, and you think he was like a little bit of an attention hog, by the way, every 20-something influencer is going to be an attention hog with millions of followers, then that's fine. But I just think you're so missing the forest for the trees if that's what you're focused on.
And one of the things that like I tried to stay away from the whole social media train, as far as, what was how people were being, obsessed with the horse and being involved. And granted, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the fact that people, loved Sandman or love Sandman, and the fact that he got that kind of attention, and the fact that, is it the cart before the horse or a chicken before the egg? I don't know. Is it that Griffin was involved and was promoting the horse, and therefore Metallica, wanted to be involved with the horse and have a photo op? And, oh, by the way, we had a really positive article in the New York Times, on the front page of the New York Times, of the Saturday sports section, about Sandman and influencers and positive things going on in the New York Times, which isn't a rag anymore. Like, a raggish thing. So you can't have it all. You can't have like, oh, we want to have new people come into the business and help the sport and promote the sport and be involved. And, oh, well, he was a little bit too cute. He was a little bit too, egocentric. He was, what? That comes with the deal. The fact that that you and I do this podcast, part of it is, it's not for the money. Part of it is because, there's a little bit of ego stroking going on here. I mean, I get it. I understand that I like to be the center of attention sometimes, but a lot of it is because we're trying to promote the positive of the business and iron out some of the negatives to try to make it, come together and make it a better overall sport. And, do I like the fact that like my daughters, who are in their 20s, who really didn't have a lot of interest in the business, and it wasn't from lack of trying on my part or my family's part, they're just not interested in the horse industry for a lot of reasons. But they started following, and they were like, oh, Sandman's really cool, and that's really good, and I'm seeing it positive. And my friends are asking me questions about the horse industry, and it's not, oh, why do these horses have to die on the racetrack? It's positive stuff. Well, then, you gotta look at it from an overarching standpoint and say, is the good outweighing, the kind of maybe a little bit teeny bopper annoyance factor of it? Yeah, it really is. And there's a reason it's not just Sandman. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's the Sandman solution. Okay. But there's a reason why all the numbers were up this year, from attendance to wagering to, interest on social media, and basically every metric you could throw up there. We did better than the previous year and the year before that. And some statistics were better. Like the past 20 years, this was the best year and the most watched and the most interesting year. And I got to tell you, it wasn't like because you had these, Alidar and Affirmed in the race, where people were like, oh my God, this is like the Michael Jordan of this generation for horses. There were a lot of good stories. And one of those good stories was Sandman. And one of the good stories certainly was journalism. And there were a lot of things that people gravitated towards for various reasons. But you can't look at it and say, oh yeah, what, like you said, Joe, was this mid 20-year-old, a little bit egocentric, and look at me. Yeah. They all are, and we are. And that's part of being in the spotlight and taking the good and the bad. I will say one thing, because I didn't talk to Griffin. I hadn't had the opportunity to talk to Griffin at all until we were doing the walkover, and right before the walkover. And he turned to me and very humbly and honestly turned to me and said, this is one of the greatest experiences of my life. And he got choked up. And you know what? I was feeling the same thing. And I've been in this business for 40 years. And that was one of the best feelings I've ever had. And I was getting emotional and choked up. And he posted a video after the Derby. And I know it was a little bit edited, and I know it was a little choppy. But at the end of the day, it was sincere. And it was basically him pouring his heart out about how he was disappointed in the result, but not disappointed in his horse. And isn't that what we all want to have at the end of the day? Don't we want to be proud of what we own and what we represent when they cross the finish line?
Yeah, and shouting out the training staff and the grooms and the hot walkers, and I just think, like I said, beggars can't be choosers, and West Point has been involved and ABR has been involved with a lot of other social media influencers who they gave a percentage of a horse for, and then the trade-off was that you come and you promote the game. You know how many of them have done the bare minimum that should show up at the racetracks on race day, take half a dozen pictures, post their stories, not even a grid post, just put them on the stories. And then that's it. They go cash their check and then they go back to their regular life.
Right.
Like this was the opposite of that. Like I'd rather someone do too much than not do enough at all. And I think, like I said, you can't have it both ways.
Right.
You can't complain that we have no new generation in this game, and then also complain that the person who is bringing a new generation isn't doing it quite the way that you would like them to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he got Mark Cassidy to do the ice bucket challenge, for God's sake. I mean, that in itself was phenomenal.
Yeah, and also I do want to shout out Mark Cassidy and their team. They've been unbelievable in terms of like the access and like the content for Sandman, and if you're mad that your horse didn't get as much attention as Sandman, maybe you should do a little bit more promotion. Right. Maybe it would behoove you and your team and the sport if you were able to promote your horse the same way. It really rubbed me the wrong way.
Or win a grade 1 before the Derby. Maybe that's a way to get good exposure. Also, is maybe have your horse do the talking also.
Right, and it just, I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way, like how many people were like celebrating him not winning. And we'll see you nerds at the Belmont. That's all I got to say about that.